one of the things I think are important are policy choices that happen elsewhere that in time increase costs and over time have inflationary effects. So, for example, not so long ago, we were downgraded into junk status as a country. Sorry, I hope it doesn't kind of trigger things.
It does.
and more recently, we were greylisted. How do these contribute to this animal called inflation?
So maybe let me just explain what greylisting is. Do you think everyone knows what?
It's a good thing to do. Let's start with definitions. It's a good place for definitions. It's a business school after all, and then we'll move on to the implications of
yes. So the Financial Action Task Force, which is a global body that has been set up to look at how we deal with money laundering and the financing of terrorism and proliferation financing, which is a very fancy word for financing the production of weapons. So the G20 countries have set up the structure, and between us, and South Africa is a member of the G20, we have revolving presidency of the structure. And FATF basically sets the standards that are meant to be assisting all of us to curb illicit behavior. And so every few years, FATF will come to a country and they'll do what they call a mutual evaluation. And all of us have got specific responsibilities in terms of what it is that we have to deliver in order to meet with the FATF standards. So in 2019, we had an assessment team come to South Africa to assess us. And during that assessment that they did for us in 2019, they found a number of gaps. And that report was published in 2021. And when that report was published, you generally are given 12 months to remediate what their findings are. And then FATF then has a sit down to determine whether there's more homework for you to do or whether everything is good. And if there's more homework for you to do, we call it a grey list because it's a soft list that is meant to give you a set of actions on which you should be remediating on. And you usually are given 2 years as a country to remediate. If you are not able to remediate in that 2-year period, then you would then be put on what is called a blacklist. You are a naughty child. You've gone beyond detention. We have to watch you very closely. So we went through this process of remediation in South Africa, and we presented to FATF where we were at the end of January, and in February, FATF pronounced that we still needed to be watched. There are things that we have remediated on, but not sufficiently in other areas. And we have about 17 odd action items that we still need to remediate on over the next 2 years. Now, what does it mean in practical terms to be greylisted? So all of us, when we have, if you run a business for trade finance purposes, the South African banks are not always the ones that will follow the trade from beginning to end. But if you are in a country small like ours, where the bulk of the transactions in dollar terms are cleared by US-based banks, or there'll be UK-based banks that will clear on the side of the sterling-based payments, you need a correspondent bank. So you will see the bank on your side, but they need a correspondent bank on the other side of the transaction in order for the transactions to come to an end. Now, what it means when you're from a grey-listed country is that the correspondent bank says, hey, this is one of the kids at detention. Let me ask a lot more questions. So basically, that's what happens. It's an additional cost layer that there is, but there's also a time delay factor that would exist. So a transaction that might have taken 2 days to complete might suddenly take 5 days to complete, because you're now from a grey listed country and they need to look a lot more closely at a number of factors. So that is the one part. So far, the ratings agencies, among others, have said, okay, you're just on the watch list because that is the culture of FATA. We allow you to remediate. We're going to give you the 2 years. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And then we'll have this conversation again. But there are other jurisdictions that, of course, act. And one of the jurisdictions that has acted is the EU. They don't call theirs a grey list. They call theirs a blacklist. But it's pretty much very similar to what FATF has. And if they had said, we're not going to check you, you're a good country, you meet these criteria, this is what they had said to JSE Clear, because JSE Clear had equivalence. And suddenly we have the grey listing and they say to JSE Clear, sorry, you no longer have EU equivalence. Here, it doesn't affect too many of our trades because the EU side is not as large. But if the UK were to act, we'd have other problems. But the short thing that I should just say is if you take the combination of a country that has a low credit downgrade and now there's the FATF grey list, there are lots of things that investors think about that they would consider to be country risk. So some of them are visible to some of us in the room. Some of them will be not so visible, but they're there. They inform how they make decisions if they were to pick between South Africa and another jurisdiction. So these are some of these invisible costs. Some of them are tangible costs that you could look to, but some of them are invisible costs, but they still influence investor perception.